In 1990, he traveled to an island country in a parallel world and became the president of a game company. He had already realized that the future direction of Qingzhiyuan in the next 30 years could not fail. But a few years later Qing Zhiyuan still hasn't figured out a single thing. Although I have created so many milestone games, such as the King of War Chess, the founder of RTS, the creator of Big IP, and the pioneer of online gaming. Why do everyone call me the father of gameplay? Being forced to do a game is really not my intention. Novel keyword. Terrifying. Surprisingly playing this kind of game. No pop-ups, scary. Surprisingly playing this kind of game. Download the complete TXT collection, terrifying. Surprisingly playing this kind of game. Latest chapter reading. What is a good game to play in Chapter 1? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. What is a good game to play? Gal game, also known as Pretty Girl game. It is an electronic game where players can interact with animated girls, and its audience used to be neon men. However, with the development of the all-age gal game storyline, the audience is no longer gender neutral. Most of the game types in gal game are VNG, visual novels, but there are also interactive gal games. Simply put, it is an interactive game for dating beautiful girls. March 1990. Tokyo, Pokini Company, Limited. The internal atmosphere of the company is very solemn, and weak sighs can be heard from time to time. I feel like the future is bleak. Isn't it true that the company has just started and is about to run out? This time, it should be completely hopeless. The sales of this game are not good, coupled with this unfortunate economic situation, the company may also go bankrupt. Yeah, who would have thought that last year's economic situation was very good, but this year it's like jumping off the rooftop. Really? I don't want the company to go bankrupt. I still have a family to support. If I lose my job at this time. Meanwhile, inside the president's office. Qing Zhiyuan also sighed, but the reason for his sigh was different from those of the employees outside. What happened to Nima? It's okay to be reborn, but surprisingly, she was reborn to an island country and her parents died. She had no car or house and owed a lot of debt. Yes, Qingzhiyuan has been reborn. The current date is April 1, 1990, not the familiar 2023 Chinese Magic City, and his current identity is the president of Pokini Company, Limited. The neon in this parallel world, when the economic foam burst last year, the whole country howled and fell from the peak to the bottom. Up to now, homeless people due to company bankruptcy can be seen everywhere on the streets. Pokini, a small gaming company, has almost fallen to the brink of bankruptcy since its previous game failed. It remains to be seen whether it can pay its employees on time next month. It's difficult to start with hell, otherwise it's better to find a job after bankruptcy. Qing Zhiyuan frowned painfully and held both hands in a bitter state. However, as the saying goes, Qingzhiyuan still has no choice but to play games. If possible, it would be best to keep the company running. It is impossible to work in this lifetime. In 1990, after the island country's economic foam burst, countless people became pessimistic and desperate, their willingness to consume declined significantly, and countless companies went bankrupt. Since then, countless industries have fallen into the abyss, but a few of them are against the trend. Games are one of them. Although the islanders entered an era of economic stagnation and low consumer desire from then on, it precisely became the golden age for the development of the gaming industry. Games will become the largest and most popular consumer goods for countless dead homes and current users in island countries in the coming decades. Moreover, Qing Zhiyuan's previous job was to play games. Before his rebirth, his identity was the main program of a certain anime project of Miha Company, and his technology must not be said. He was also one of the main developers of Miha animation engine, and he had great enthusiasm for games. The company is also the main anime game, which is more suitable for island games. So this lifetime of playing games is like a fish in water for him. What surprised Qing Zhiyuan even more was that the original owner of this body had a strong painting ability before taking on the role of producer. Very good. My programming skills, combined with a wealth of gaming experience, strong drawing skills, and advanced aesthetic perception of the future world. Qingzhiyuan's mouth slightly curved upwards. There is no possibility of failure in playing games in this lifetime. Pokini is in danger now, we need to find a way to save him. The top priority is to secure an investment, and aside from anything else, at least the planning needs to be done well first. I have to think about which game to play first. Bah. There are many 3A masterpieces in Qing Zhiyuan's mind, but 3A masterpieces have several fatal drawbacks. They require a lot of people, a lot of money, and a lot of time. Yes, this is also basically the definition of 3A. Simply put, a typical 3A masterpiece refers to high cost, high volume, and high quality games. Games like Wilderness Daredevil 2, which cost 5.6 billion yuan and have been developed for nearly 8 years, are unimaginable. The most that Qingzhiyuan can grasp is high quality. He opened the computer and created a new TXT document, writing a line of text on it. Legend of Sword and Fairy. The first game that Qing Zhiyuan thought of was The Legend of Sword and Fairy. Qingzhiyuan is a domestically produced single-player Chinese role-playing computer game released by Daewoo Information in 1995. Due to its grand story background, full of unique Chinese martial arts fantasy colors, and touching and healing stories, it has become a classic. The performance of Xian 1 is actually very good, with sales of over 200,000 yuan on China's Baodao. Later, I planned to transplant it to the Sega SS to enter the island market, but unfortunately Sega was not competitive and lost in the competition with Nintendo's console, so Qingzhiyuan did not achieve good results on the SS. Apart from cultural differences, it can only be said that bad luck does not mean that the Immortal Sword is not good. In Qing Zhiyuan's view, human emotions are interconnected, and even an anime with obvious island characteristics like Clannad can still move Chinese people. Why is Fairy Sword not enough? If there was still a significant gap between the production level of the DOS version of the Qingzhiyuan and the international mainstream back then now Qingzhiyuan is standing on top of the world mainstream. With Pokini's current research and development capabilities, the development effect on FC may be better, as long as the characters are well drawn. In addition, there is another important reason why it is called Sword and Fairy. Pokini's newly released game, Sword Heart, may have been a hit, but this game is definitely a turn-based RPG game. Turn-based, RPG, Swordsman. All of these are very compatible with Sword and Fairy, which can save at least half of the time in game development. At the very least, most of the work on the program side has been completed, and the rest is to remake the art, replace it with another story in process, and add some detailed features to make it perfect. The Qingzhiyuan series, especially the story of Qingzhiyuan 1, will definitely impress investors. After staying up all night, Qing Zhiyuan briefly wrote a rough idea of the story of the Immortal Sword, and made character designs and descriptions in it. Afterwards, he called the company's copywriting planner, Meika Ishino, into the conference room. "President, may I ask what's up?" Ishino is a petite girl in her 20s, wearing a pair of round-framed glasses and a white sweater wrapped around a curvaceous figure that doesn't match her appearance. Her voice was not loud, but Qing Zhiyuan could hear it very clearly. He looked up at her and handed her the printed document. "Take a look, can you write this story well? I'm planning to make it into a business plan and look for investment." "Hey." Ishino's eyes lit up. "So the company doesn't have to go bankrupt, and I don't have to lose my job. Let me explain in advance. The content described in this book is not entirely in line with the real world. It also does not map any real content. Because there are some contents that cannot be written. Once written, the book will be sealed. So it will be rationalized and modified in this book. As long as there are no logical flaws, then everyone will consider the author's setting as a parallel world. If there are logical flaws, please point them out in this chapter so that the author can make changes upon seeing them. Thank you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. What? Make Immortal Sword into Yin-Yang Master. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. What? Make Immortal Sword into Yin-Yang Master. Shi Yi was stunned for a moment, somewhat flattered. However, there was more joy in the situation, so the president did not give up on this company, which means there was no need to look for a new job. 21-year-old Ashino thought so. A good president. She was overjoyed and quickly took the document from the president's hand. Meika Ashino sat quietly on the sofa, carefully reading the document in her hand. Qingzhiyuan is not in a hurry either. He stayed up all night last night, but now he is very excited. Taking advantage of the time when Shirya is reading documents, he silently walked to the side and brewed a cup of coffee for himself and Shirya respectively. Each position in a small company is very streamlined, and the entire company has only one copywriting planner responsible for all the text content in the game, as well as writing the game script, which is the game plot. Qingzhiyuan has already decided what to do, but still needs copywriting planners to complete it, which is to execute Qingzhiyuan. Copywriting and planning are extremely important when playing RPG games. A good copy can create a strong sense of immersion even without visuals. Fortunately, Ashino has a good foundation in writing, as can be seen from the previous company's Sword Heart. The entire text story doesn't have too many words, and it only looks like more than 10,000 words before and after. Ashino looked very carefully, and even the documents in his hand were a bit hot because this matter was related to the life and death of the entire company. Although the president did not explain this, Ashino could feel it from the president's silent gaze at her. But she quickly immersed herself in the president's words. Because this story is so wonderful, a poor boy with a dream of being a great hero but running an inn. He met a lovely girl on Fairy Island and even got married on the island, but why did he lose his memory later on? What a great couple they are. I don't know when I can recover my memory. Then, in order to help Linger return to the kingdom of Nanzhao, a group of people began a difficult journey. Looking at it, Ashino's eyes were filled with tears. Qingzhiyuan silently received everything in his eyes and timely handed over the tissue as Shirya's fingers gently flipped over the last page. Thank you, President. I'm a bit out of control. Ashino took off his glasses and wiped the corners of his eyes. But this story completely moved me. I really couldn't control it. Ashino clenched his fist. Moved is moved, but there is an inexplicable melancholy and an impulse to hold the president's neck, hoping he can change the ending. However, upon careful reflection, this magnificent sacrifice may be the most memorable. After thinking through this layer, Ashino immediately felt the emotions and recognition of the sadness and beauty that the president poured into this document. No, that's exactly what I want to see. Qing Zhiyuan smiled and sat in the chair opposite her, clasping his hands together. After she calmed down, he asked, "Can you tell me your thoughts on this story?" How to say it? Ashino put her glasses back on her face, and although the story was not written very well, it seemed like she had already watched a movie in her mind, which is still vivid in her memory. After pondering for a few seconds, Ashino tentatively said, "President, this story is very touching, but I'm worried that people may have doubts about many of its concepts at the cultural level." Ashino flipped through the document in his hand and said, "For example, here's Nuwa, Idwa, and here's Li Xiaoyao, flying sword. It's hard to imagine many similar terms, and I'm afraid players won't be able to appreciate the profound atmosphere beyond the beautiful love story." Qingzhiyuan smiled and realized that Ashino is a talented person. "Well, yes, this is a Chinese story." "Oh, no wonder." Ashino nodded, but this kind of story can only be written by someone like the president who has Chinese ancestry and such understanding of Chinese culture. This is actually also a concern for me. Qing Zhiyuan, who was originally very confident when he saw Ishino cry, is now not quite sure. The fairy sword is a good story, but its drawbacks seem obvious. It can indeed move people, but without cultural heritage, it loses a lot of experience. If Chinese people can experience 100% of playing the fairy sword, then for island people, perhaps they can only experience 80%. Shiya sang, can you see if this is possible? Qing Zhiyuan said, keep the overall storyline unchanged, and then replace the background and characters with a neon background. Is that okay? Hey. Ishino paused for a moment, seemingly not expecting the president to make such a decisive decision in a short period of time. After a few seconds of contemplation, she nodded solemnly. This poignant story, in fact, has a large part that is quite close to neon culture. Monsters are very common in neon legends. If that's the case, perhaps using Neon's Yin-Yang Master as the background can work. It's possible. Qing Zhiyuan's entire body seemed to have been suddenly connected to the Rendu meridian, and a flash of electricity flashed through his brain. Master Yin and Yang. How could I not have thought of it? If the fairy sword is replaced with a Yin-Yang Master, and then Zhao Linger is replaced with a witch from the island country, with a demon bloodline and integrated into the island country's own mythology. While retaining the storyline of the fairy sword, the conflict between humans and demons, and the witch's death to save the world, then this game becomes a refreshing yet touching healing story. This is a new game that shares a common soul with Xianjian, but is completely different. However, it inexplicably makes Qingzhiyuan feel very motivated to do it. Shaisang, you are really a genius. Qing Zhiyuan was so happy that he wished he could give her a kiss on the face. If that's the case, then it would be better to keep The Legend of Sword and Fairy in the future and wait for it to be released in China in a few years. Seeing the excited expression of the president, Ishino's hand holding coffee couldn't help but tremble. I don't know why, but it feels like the president has changed. A few days ago, he was still lifeless, but now he can feel infinite energy in his body. Ishino lowered her head and glanced at her cup, which reflected her slightly childish face. It was the first time she had experienced the joy and charm of making games since entering the industry. After discussing with Ishino for about 3 hours and finalizing most of the details, Qing Zhiyuan regained his initial confidence. After finalizing the game theme and content, it will be much simpler to complete the planning section. After a week, Pokini's new project, Yin-Yang Master, was successfully completed. Okay. Take it and get invested. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Why didn't you refuse? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Unexpectedly did not refuse. How could this be? Qing Zhiyuan stood in front of a 10-story office building and let out a nearly desperate sigh. There is a large DUN sign hanging on the roof, and the glass doors on the first floor vividly depict his haggard appearance. The process of attracting investment is extremely difficult. Before the neon economic foam burst, it was easy to attract investment. Even if you didn't need to go to other people, there would be many investors coming to lend you money. And now it can only be described as a small household, where everyone has no money and surviving is considered good, let alone investing. Those who are willing to invest in this era, besides banks, really need some courage and financial resources. DUN Company, Limited is one of the few, even rare, enterprises. To be precise, DUN is not an investment company. They used to work in children's toys, but a year ago they started their own career as adult toys. In addition to Balloon People, they were also responsible for shooting and distributing some Blue videos. This company is also one of the few companies that did not suffer the impact of the entire financial tsunami and even made a little money. Qingzhiyuan doesn't even know whether the president of DUN Society is too timid or too bold. Say he is brave. He didn't make a fortune when the national foam took off. Say he is timid and dare to open up new markets after the foam burst. But good luck is true. Not long ago, DUN announced that they wanted to invest in gaming, and DUN may be the last straw to save Qingzhiyuan's life. Counting thousands of calculations, who would have thought it would fall on a small ridge? Prior to this, Qing Zhiyuan had almost traveled to major venture capital firms in Tokyo, and banks had also searched everywhere, only needing to borrow high-interest loans from clubs with the word group. If we don't receive DUN's investment today, Qingzhiyuan doesn't know what to do. Without money to realize one's dreams, life is nothing more heartbreaking than this. Knowing that as long as one can smoothly embark on the road to the future, they will have a great future. With the rich experience and strength of Qingzhiyuan, they can achieve extremely high success in controlling the future no matter what. However, before taking this first step, they have solidly stumbled. Qing Zhiyuan took a deep breath and patted his cheek with his hand, picking himself up. Come on. Then, carrying their briefcase, they walked into DUN's office building with copywriting planner Ishino and company IT engineer Hiroyoshi Chikawa. Because he had already made an appointment beforehand, Qing Zhiyuan was quickly invited to the conference room after arriving at DUN's office location. A few people sat for a while with a nervous heart, and the door to the conference room was opened. From outside, a young woman dressed in a white suit, with exquisite makeup and hair, a slender figure, thin cheeks, and an unusually heavy weight in a certain area walked in. Qing Zhiyuan only glanced at it and made an evaluation in his heart. Although this young lady is very beautiful, she inexplicably has a sense of alienation and doesn't look easy to get along with. Everyone, I have been waiting for a long time. I am Naoya Suda, the president of DUN. This is our first time meeting, please give me your guidance. Please provide more guidance. A few people quickly stood up and bowed in salute. After sitting down again, Qing Zhiyuan was amazed to himself. He never expected that the president of DUN society would be a woman, and she was still such a young woman. It should be noted that the company's current business is mainly in the blue market, and it requires a very precise grasp of men's interests. Can girls understand men's preferences? Thinking of this, Qing Zhiyuan couldn't help but beat a drum in his heart. If you walk on the street and see a beautiful woman like Naoya Suda, you may feel a sense of joy in your heart, and your day is always happy. But encountering in the business world is not a good thing. It's not discrimination against women, it's mainly because the number of women working in the neon industry is too small, let alone in the gaming industry. Many girls actually don't play games very much. If they don't have enough understanding of games, they may reject their plans. No, if it's a woman, she might be even more moved by the story of Yin Yang Master. After the group finished introducing themselves, Naoya Suda took the lead and said, I have seen your company's business plan and to be honest, I am deeply moved. Thank you, Qing Zhiyuan quickly responded. A few days ago, Pokini had already sent the project proposal to DUN, and the initial intention of the other party should be good, otherwise there would not have been this interview. When Suda entered the conference room, he was holding the project proposal for the Yin Yang Master that they had previously sent. She spoke while flipping through the contents inside. In fact, she had read it no less than 3 times before, but every time she flipped through it, she couldn't help but be attracted by the stories inside. Suda Nayo lifted his head and looked at the young president sitting across from him, asking, President Qing, I see that your budget statement states that you need 50 million yuan in research and development costs, right? What is your expected development cycle, sales volume, and any goals? My expected sales share is over 100,000, and my goal is to turn this game into a milestone classic game. Even after 10 or 20 years, players can still remember the latest and timeless work. Ale. The bodies of the 2 people next to him, Ishino and Chikawa, vibrated slightly. They had not communicated with each other before, and it was a bit shocking to hear them for the first time. 100,000 copies. This is such a terrifying number. There are only a few games that can exceed 100,000 copies in a year. The last game, Sword Heart, has not sold 2,000 copies so far. How did the president have the courage to say that a new game can have 100,000 copies? However, upon careful consideration, this must also be the president's rhetoric. It is obvious that President Suda is a woman who does not know much about gaming. Such investors value the return on investment more, as long as they can successfully obtain the investment. It must be like this. Suda Nayo lowered his eyes and remained silent, his gaze fixed on the paper, carefully examining the proposal in front of him. In order to increase the chips, Qing Zhiyuan even added several original character paintings in the business plan, corresponding to the male lead and 3 female leads in Yin Yang Master. With his painting skills, level, and aesthetics, these original paintings are at least 20 years ahead of the current time. Suda Nayo's gaze fell on one of the pictures. This was the first female protagonist, Yuki Rei, with long straight black hair and beautiful big pupils. She had a well-proportioned figure and a unique strong expression on her face. She was dressed in a red and white witch costume, holding a long bow in her hand. With just one glance, she would definitely be attracted to this character. In fact, Qingzhiyuan was designed based on the image of Kikyu in the future Inuyasha. Of course, achieving this image and clarity in the game will definitely require a significant discount. To put it simply, these few original paintings are just a means used by Qing Zhiyuan to attract investment. It's okay to deceive lay people, but it's impossible for insiders to achieve such an effect at a glance. After 2 seconds, Nayo Suda spoke up and said, "You have invested in this game Dun. If 50 million is not enough, we can add 20 million to you." Hey! Qingzhiyuan was slightly taken aback. "I haven't asked many questions yet, why did I vote?" He came today with the determination to die, even the lower seat was ready, but he didn't expect the other party to agree so readily. There's nothing to refuse. This project is done quite well, with excellent scripts and beautiful character designs. I believe it can be done well. Suda Nayo closed his plan and lifted his head with a bright smile. Qing Zhiyuan immediately stood up and bowed, "Great, President Jintian, thank you." Before he could finish speaking, Nayo Suda interrupted, "However, I have an additional request." Qingzhiyuan gritted his teeth. Sure enough, there's no such thing as pie falling from the sky. If he agrees too readily, he will actually feel that something is not right. Anyway, if Dun can stand out in the tide of the times, the president will definitely not be so foolish. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. What? Make Yin Yang Master a game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. What? Make Yin Yang Master a game. Is it about sharing? Qing Zhiyuan asked. Investors are not foolish either. It is impossible to make angel investments just to make you play games. If you lose money, others will lose money. If you make money, you will naturally have to negotiate a share, and according to general rules, the party who invests more will naturally receive a large share. It is possible for you to get 73 or even 82 points. The smaller end is Pokini's. In this way, higher requirements are placed on the game itself. If it cannot reach a certain sales share, even if Pokini can obtain this investment, it may not necessarily be profitable in the end. Of course, the same applies to investors. Dun has invested 70 million yuan in you and naturally hopes to earn back this money. If we split it up, I'm very tolerant on my end, Naoya Suda smiled. We'll stick to a score of 55. After all, this is our first cooperation, and I hope to win the trust of your company. Hey! Several people, including Meika Ishino and Hiroyoshi Chikawa, were extremely shocked by this proposal. The investor with a score of 55 is simply an angel. This president is either really foolish or full of confidence in Pokini's product, no less than Qing Zhiyuan himself. Qingzhiyuan is a bit foolish. But that's not what I'm talking about as a condition, continued Nayo Suda. For your company's work, I have only one request, which is, please make sure to make it gal game nanny. Upon hearing this news, Qingzhiyuan was like a bolt from the blue, even more shocking than the 55 kai just now. Gal game, also known as Pretty Girl Game. It is an electronic game where players can interact with animated girls, and its audience used to be neon men. However, with the development of the all-age gal game storyline, the audience is no longer gender neutral. Most of the game types in gal game are VNG, visual novels, but there are also interactive gal games. Simply put, it is an interactive game for dating beautiful girls. Pretty girl games had already appeared on personal computers not long after they first emerged. In 1982, Japan's Glory Company launched a beautiful girl game called Nightlife. The initial gal game was not very popular among people. Although this game is significantly different from the early 21st century girl games, it is the earliest recorded work of this kind. Early gameplay had a deep blue imprint, but that doesn't mean all gameplay was blue. It can also be a very pure love story. But at this time in the 1990s, it always gives people a bad impression. Upon hearing Nayo Suda's request to turn Yin Yang Master into a game, Qing Zhiyuan was completely dumbfounded. How can this be done? Qingzhiyuan's instinctive resistance. The Yin Yang Master is the work of him and Ishino after so many days of hard work, and its soul is a legendary sword. Think about it, would it be appropriate to change the fairy sword into a game? Even if it's a romantic relationship made into a pure strategy girl, players will inexplicably associate certain aspects. Not only Qingzhiyuan, but also Meika Ishino beside her was foolish. She blinked her big eyes and couldn't imagine what it would be like to turn this Yin Yang Master into a game. Qingzhiyuan suppressed his shock and coughed in response. President Suda, to be frank, this game may not be suitable for gameplay because our story and character setting are based on a pure love route, and this is a turn-based battle game. The conflict between humans and monsters, mission and destiny are the most important parts of the game. If it were to become a game, it would probably be biased MMM. Next to Ishino, he didn't speak and couldn't help but nod. Suda Nayo looked at Qingzhiyuan with a smile in his eyes, and after he finished explaining his reasons, he continued, but this is exactly where I value it. I don't know how much President Qing knows about DUN. So far, DUN can be considered a large entertainment company. In addition to producing children's toys and anime-related products, its main revenue in recent years has come from the blue industry. So we have detailed and in-depth research on the blue market, as well as possible future developments in the blue field. DUN's goal is very clear, which is to invest in a game, but I haven't found a satisfactory one until I met your company. This project proposal is exactly the answer in my mind. What Suda Nayo said is true. During this period, she has received many project proposals, and after reading many, she feels that they are very mediocre. The birth of gameplay is not short, but so far, similar games on the market can be said to be fast food, just like early AV movies. The male lead directly approaches you and the other person can play poker with you without any process, simple and rough, without any beauty. Although blue is a human instinct, today's audiences and players are already tired of such a rough and straightforward approach. As the president of a blue company, Nayo Suda naturally understands this principle. When she saw Pokini's project, Nayo Suda couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement in her heart, because this was indeed the answer she had been pursuing. Love is the most beautiful experience in life, and I hope to help players find the feeling of love in your game, said Nayo Suda, looking up at Qing Zhiyuan's eyes without directly asking Pokini to turn the Yin Yang Master into a blue game. Qing Zhiyuan felt that this woman had already shown mercy. Ishino and Chikawa blushed and felt ashamed as they listened beside them. They had not yet tasted the joy of love. But in Qing Zhiyuan's view, it is precisely this purity that enables Ishino to write good works. The elements of love in your story are touching enough, and this game can definitely define gameplay to new heights. The key is whether you have the ability to do so. Nayo Suda also has his own considerations. The sense of love is something that is difficult for her to convey in film and television works, or for the audience to experience perfectly. Is it possible to achieve this through gaming? Nayo Suda expressed great anticipation for this. Pokini's yin-yang master may be the key to opening that sacred door in the gaming industry. How can it be repaired? This damn woman. Surprisingly, I understand men's preferences so well. These principles almost convinced Qing Zhiyuan, because he deeply knew that what Nayo Suda said was a fact, because 2 years later, in 1992, a company called Elf will use a game called Same Level Student to elevate the entire gameplay to a level that should not have belonged to it. Before the birth of peers, the entire Gal game market could be said to be an animal market. People pursued simple and rough happiness, and peers moved players with pure love. Through delicate character shaping of different female leads, players enjoyed the true love process. Love first, then blue, achieving classics and laying the foundation for future gameplay. Now that Nayo Suda was able to realize this in advance can only demonstrate how cruel this woman's vision is. Qing Zhiyuan does not want to do this from the bottom of his heart. On the one hand, if Pokini's famous work is a game, then this club, including the president and himself as a producer, will be deeply branded from now on. It is not easy to get on the market, and it is uncertain whether the transformation will be successful in the future. On the other hand, he truly cherishes the game of Yin-Yang Master and does not want such a good game to be tarnished by other things. Even if the game itself can be normalized without any blue elements, it will always give people bad associations due to the times. And this woman is pushing him into an irreparable abyss. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Why don't you go to heaven? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Why don't you go to heaven? President Suda, I greatly appreciate your proposal, but there is one thing I need to let you know in advance. Qing Zhiyuan took a deep breath and said, there is still a certain difference between gameplay and the RPG game we want to play. Well, please speak. Nayo Suda raised his hand and humbly asked for advice. The focus of Gal game is to guide girls and achieve love. In order to provide players with a deep experience, the quality of the graphics must be very high. If we want to make it into a dynamic CG, there will be further image quality requirements. Being able to draw character portraits and stand up is the foundation, and creating excellent dynamic CG is the key. Nayo Suda nodded, fully agreeing with Qing Zhiyuan's statement. President Qing, your words dispelled my previous concerns. You were able to draw such a beautiful character, and at the same time, you were able to analyze the essence of gameplay so thoroughly, which proves that I did not misread anyone. Your company will definitely make this game a classic, and even a masterpiece of future love games. President Jintian's eyes lit up, as if he was already immersed in endless fantasies about the future. Hee. This foolish woman didn't expect to fall for me, did she? But there's a big problem here, Qing Zhiyuan said with a heartfelt chuckle and a change in tone. Suda Nayo lifted his head and looked at him with confusion. At present it is almost impossible to achieve the desired effect on FC. Qing Zhiyuan pursed his lips and pretended to look regretful. Hiroyoshi Chikawa frowned and agreed, the performance of the red and white machine is limited, and the image quality is definitely not up to standard. According to the president's requirements for image quality, a picture needs to be at least 0.5 m in size, with 15 characters and each person producing at least 3 to 4 pictures. So we have to go for 100 m. Even if we can do compression processing, we may only be able to reduce it to 50 m in the end, which is an impossible task to complete on FC. To put it simply, the most advanced game consoles on the market are still Nintendo's red and white consoles. The 8-bit console itself has limited operating efficiency and low support for colors, only reaching a total of 52 colors, with a maximum display of 13 colors on the same screen. This is not enough to support such a great work as Yin-Yang Master. The essence of gameplay lies in its copywriting and visuals, especially those thrilling illustrations and interactive CG. If not done well, it loses its meaning. Although it is CG, it is processed through multiple images in the game, rather than actual video playback. Otherwise, this capacity would have to go towards 1 GB, which hardware cannot support in this era. To put it more simply, early dating CG was actually a dynamic image, allowing players to switch between different images when clicking, thereby achieving an interactive effect. Even in order to save space and improve execution efficiency, a picture will be divided into many parts. For example, when interacting with the face, only the face will be replaced, and when interacting with the body will be replaced. Upon hearing this news, Naoya Suda couldn't help but feel a hint of regret. It's really a pity if such a great work cannot be realized, he said. Yes. Qing Zhiyuan nodded abruptly and said, but if it's made into a pure RPG game, as long as the plot and game are attractive enough, there can still be good sales. Unless. At this moment, Qianchuan next to him suddenly spoke up, startling Qing Zhiyuan. Nowadays, mainstream home computers have much stronger performance than FCs. Is there a possibility to consider selling them on computers? Chikawa Hiroshi pondered. Oh, I'll strangle it. Qingzhiyuan let out a bitter cry in his heart. I was almost convinced to succeed just now. Chikawa, you are still Pokini's person. Give me a knife from behind. It's not possible. The number of computer users is much worse than that of game consoles, argued Qing Zhiyuan. At this time, the number of home consoles, especially Nintendo's FC, has reached over 15 million, including 35 million NES sold in Europe and America. And what about personal computers? The island country only has 1.5 million units, which is not an order of magnitude. If it's done on a PC, I can't guarantee sales, Qing Zhiyuan said seriously. In fact, the previous version of Same Level Student was released on a computer and created over 100,000 great miracles. What is the concept of 1.5 million computer users contributing over 100,000 copies? It can only be said that there are indeed many LSPs. So. The light in Naoya Suda's eyes dimmed once again. What if we add a chip? Chikawa Hiroi asked. It's specifically designed to handle image and memory issues. This may allow us to support around 50 megabytes of cartridge capacity while squeezing out all the performance of the red and white machines. Even if it's not particularly exquisite, it's enough to make all blue games on the market unbeatable. Qing Zhiyuan next to him was stunned and almost spewed out a mouthful of old blood. I'm so special. Adding a chip, why don't you go to heaven, you? Qingzhiyuan didn't react for a long time. He carefully searched his brain for the resume of Chikawa Hongi and found that this guy seemed to have studied semiconductors in college before. The company hired him as a hardware engineer to make next-generation home game consoles. How can it be repaired? In the 1990s, Neon Semiconductors were said to be second in the world, but no one dared to recognize them as first. Today I brought Chikawa here, originally to solve difficult problems and persuade the president of the other party to invest, but unexpectedly it evolved into this. Qing Zhiyuan feels very uncomfortable. President Qing, do you have any further questions? Naoya Suda laughed happily. Qing Zhiyuan opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. Actually, for me, there is only one answer, said Naoya Suda seriously. If your company cannot meet my requirements, then this investment will have to be cancelled. But if you don't want to make this game, please make sure to sell me this plan, and DUN will also invest 50 million to buy this product. You think so beautifully. Qing Zhiyuan took a deep breath, tidied up his suit, stood up, and bowed deeply to Suda. Naoya, then please take care of President Suda. After reaching an agreement between the two parties, it took about half a day to finalize the details. This meeting is considered over, and the contract will be drafted by DUN. The specific investment costs will be transferred to Pokini's company account through 4 phases, with a quarterly payment of 1 quarter. Great. President, we finally got the investment. 3 people came out of DUN, only Qingzhiyuan was happy. He turned around and glanced at the 2 people behind him, not quite understanding why there were such solemn expressions on the faces of Qing Zhiyuan and Ishino Meika. Didn't we get the investment? How come it feels like we've lost a battle? Chikawa Hiroyoshi chuckled and said, President, if it weren't for my strong persuasion to President Suda just now, maybe. With a fierce glare from the president, Chikawa felt a chill in his heart. End of this chapter. Do you know that you are very heavy? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Do you know that you are very heavy? Since both parties have the intention to cooperate, DUN has provided generous funding and a very relaxed degree of freedom. Apart from making it into a game, DUN will not interfere with any Pokini production. President Jin Tian also promised that when the game is released, DUN will cooperate in promoting it together. To be honest, if it weren't for the requirement of Gal Game, Suda would be a good investor. Now that everything is done, there is nothing to say about Qing Zhiyuan. Since we have done it, we must do our best. Even if it's a game. It's not a big deal to change Yin Yang Master to a game, it's just a love game that guides beautiful girls. Qing Zhiyuan's biggest concern is being mistaken by players for Huang Xiaoyu, and it will be very troublesome to wash it off in the future. By the way, since today has been so smooth, I don't think it's too early either. Otherwise, let's go have a drink together. Qing Zhiyuan raised his hand and made a gesture of drinking. Meika Ishino and Hiroyoshi Chikawa exchanged a glance, but did not immediately agree. Qing Zhiyuan remembered something and said, I'll treat you today, so don't worry. There is a tradition in the workplace of Neon, which is that although they usually go out for a drink after work and only go home after having fun, it is an AA system. Even if it is with their superiors, unless the leader takes the initiative to invite guests, everyone will pay their own money, and there is no gender difference. Girl A's share is not insignificant. This is very different from China. When he was at MiHoYo back then, Qing Zhiyuan liked to encourage his leaders to go out and organize activities because they usually paid for it. Thank you, President. The 2 of them immediately smiled and smiled. So the group found a nearby tavern, ordered groceries, and poured each other drinks to make them happy. Great, I didn't expect the president of DUN to be such a cheerful person. Chikawa Hiroshi took a sip of sake and sighed. I think you're feeling happy to be able to do a game, right? Meika Ishino said unhappily. But Qingzhiyuan's thoughts on the game are definitely not the same as Qingzhiyuan's thoughts. Nowadays, the Gal game on the market is basically equivalent to Huang Xiaoyu, but in the eyes of Qing Zhiyuan, the Gal game is definitely pure and flawless. Ha ha ha, I've been seen through. Hiroshi Chikawa blushed and touched the back of his head, but the president's portrait was really well taken care of. When President Suda picked it up and displayed it, I was stunned. Humph. Ishino was stunned for a second and suddenly reacted, hey. Chikawa, you obviously said that President Suda looks good, right? Huh, don't say it out loud. Qingzhiyuan covered his slightly hot cheeks. Qingzhiyuan shook his head straight. If it weren't for this product today, we might have successfully won DUN. But it's also hard to say. Naoya Suda appears to be a very strong woman, and if she refuses to invest in the end, it will not be worth the loss. Qingzhiyuan, do you have a lot of research on women? Why didn't you go out on a date with a girl? Qing Zhiyuan took a sip. Where and where? I'm still single so far, Chikawa Hiroshi frowned, as if feeling a bit depressed by the president's blow. It's precisely because I don't have a girlfriend that I can only play games and watch videos on my own. Bitter wine enters the throat and makes my heart ache. In my dreams, there is no one who sleeps without her. Qing Zhiyuan feels the same way. In his previous life, he worked at MiHoYo because he was too busy and didn't have time to date. Games are the source of happiness in life. What's the use of women? Qing Zhiyuan picked up his glass and touched Qianchuan. Two people drank it all at once. Next to Ishino, his eyebrows furrowed as he listened. Sure enough, men are all the same kind of people. I thought the president could be a bit different. However, is the president implying that he, like Chikawa, is a person without female votes? It shouldn't be, President. Didn't you have many girls before? Qing Zhiyuan was stunned for a moment, and now he felt even more sad. That was me from the past, what's the relationship with me now? To be honest, the original owner of this body had a little money in the foam era. He often went to popular stores, ginza, etc., but he did not experience those things. But on the other hand, Chikawa took a sip of wine and sighed with a blush. I didn't even know before that DUN's president was actually a woman, and have you noticed that President Suda has an amazing figure? He spoke and wrapped his arms around his chest. This guy obviously drank too much. No matter how beautiful the president of DUN is, it has nothing to do with him. At first glance, I think Suda must be a cold person. That kind of woman is not suitable for me. 10:30 p.m. Qingzhiyuan struggled to climb the stairs with Ishino on his back. The two of them were emitting a strong smell of alcohol, but Qingzhiyuan, who was sweating profusely from exhaustion, now had more than half of his alcohol evaporated. Ishino's tolerance for alcohol is also too poor. After drinking a little, he got drunk like a puddle of mud. Ishino, do you know you're very heavy? Nonsense, they don't. Ishino's eyes widened slightly and he muttered, I'm just having a big chest. TSK. After getting drunk, he started to act recklessly. But it seems like she didn't say anything wrong. When Ishino was wearing a loose white sweater in the company, Qing Zhiyuan had already faintly noticed. If even loose clothes cannot conceal it, maybe it's even bigger than some teachers. Ishino, why are you living in a house without an elevator? Aren't you tired of climbing stairs? President. Hiccup. Ishino hiccuped on his back, and Qingzhiyuan was afraid that she would spit it out. He quickly placed her on the ground to pat her back. This guy retched for a while, but didn't vomit anything. Instead, he sat on the ground with a squint and a smile. President, if you give me a raise, I can live in an apartment with an elevator. Why don't you give me a raise? Are you special? Qing Zhiyuan raised his hand, really wanting to punch her in the face. Is the company's money coming from cannons? What does it mean to be hit by a cannon? Meika Ishino tilted her head. Forget it, even after explaining, you don't understand. Qing Zhiyuan squatted down again and lifted her on his back. I climbed another section. President, you're pressing on my chest and I can't breathe. That's because you're too big, Qing Zhiyuan gritted his teeth and responded. President, how did you know? Qing Zhiyuan. If it weren't for your age and my anxiety, I would have left you, this crazy drunk who talks nonsense, here long ago. The two of them climbed up a little further. Ishino seems to be sleeping in a daze. Ishino. Where are you? President. Surprisingly, he hasn't fallen asleep yet. Ishino, do you know that a woman like you might lose her virginity if she goes out drinking with a malicious boy? Ishino groaned in confusion. Fortunately, I met this gentleman today. Don't drink with anyone in the future. President, Ishino murmured as he lay on his back, why be a gentleman? This. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. He is just a painter, can you understand what a game is? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. He is just a painter, can you understand what a game is? Finally carrying Shi to the entrance of the apartment, Qing Zhiyuan put her down and gently patted her face. Hey, Ishino, here we are. Oh, thank you. Ishino half squinted his eyes and then rummaged through his handbag. I took out the key and opened it a few times, only to find that it couldn't be opened. Ishino, you are really a fool. Qing Zhiyuan looked uncomfortable beside him, took the key over, tried it on his own, and found that it really couldn't be opened. At this moment, the voice of a man came from inside the room. Hey! Who are you guys? If this continues, I'll call the police. Qing Zhiyuan's hand suddenly stiffened, and the key was halfway inserted into the lock hole. What is this situation? At the same time, Shirya, leaning against the wall, suddenly lifted his head, tilted his head and chuckled, pointing his finger at the opposite building. My house is across from mine. This idiot. The next morning, before Qing Zhiyuan arrived at the company, 3 men gathered in Pokini's small conference room. They furrowed their brows and looked at each other with a serious expression. These 3 people are several executives of this company. The main planner is Takuya Mizutani, the main planner is Taiji Mizukata, and the main program is Kenji Akashi. What does it mean that the 3 giants are gathered together without the president? The air in the conference room is very heavy. The chief planner, Takashi Mizutani, also tapped on the table with his fingers and looked at the other 2 people. Akashi sang and Sakata sang, then we agreed to go find the president together later. We will collectively resign. Bruce is still waiting. I have already prepared everything for you. Blue Wings, also known as BW or Blue Wings, is another gaming company. The president used to work for Pachinko, but now with the increasing popularity of home consoles, he wants to turn to entering the home gaming market. After several encounters with the president of Bruvens, Takashi Mizutani also felt that this was a relatively good place to go. If we could package all the employees for the entire project, Ryu Mizutani would also be able to secure a producer position there and double his salary. The game production system in Neon is based on the producer system. In a project, the producer has absolute say, equivalent to the chief director of a movie, controlling the entire project production. Some games even have a very obvious personal style due to the producer. For example, the future Miyazaki Hidetaka is known for abusing players in the Soul series. The producers of some companies may have even greater fame than those of the company. Whether it's art, programming, or planning, I ultimately want to become a producer. The Sword Heart project, which Pokini has already taken to the streets, was produced by the president himself, also known as Qing Zhiyuan. Moreover, are you still not sure what Pokini looks like now? The reason for staying is simply because the company has not yet gone bankrupt. In such a big environment, it is fortunate to be able to switch jobs, and how many people outside cannot find jobs? Takashi Mizutani continued to knock on the table. After listening to Mizutani's suggestion, Sakata Taiji's face was solemn and he didn't dare to agree rashly. Isn't the president going to attract investment now? If the next game can succeed, maybe. Chishi sang, can you stop deceiving yourself? Shuegu interrupted him, it's not been a day or 2 for the president to look for investment. In this era, stock prices have halved, and not going bankrupt is considered good. Who has any spare money to lend us? Moreover, Bruvens has significantly more abundant funds, and going there is stable. Do you want to stay and gamble on tomorrow, or do you want to create a better environment for the future? I think rational people know how to make choices, right, M. Sakata Taiji glanced at Akashi Kin beside him with a corner of his eye and said, I heard from Akashi sang. He came the earliest and was the first to follow President Qing. He can also be considered a pillar of the company. I'll leave as soon as he leaves, and I'll stay as soon as he stays. After a moment of silence, Akashi Kin's eyes closed slightly and he pretended to be deep, saying, in fact, Qingzhiyuan and I are also old colleagues. He didn't use the title of president or honorific language here, mainly because Chishi's experience in the gaming industry is even older than that of Qingzhiyuan. He used to work with Qingzhiyuan in the same gaming company and was also considered his senior. It was only later that Qingzhiyuan started his own business that he was persuaded. Qingzhiyuan has dreams, momentum, and skills. I still remember the scene where he founded Pokini and came to eat with me. Every time I think of it, there is still a stream of hot blood flowing. It was Qing Zhiyuan who told me how happy it is to play games, rather than just writing code. Watching him immerse himself in the past with a happy expression on his face, Shuegu widened his eyes and said, "So what? Are you going to back out now?" Qixi sang. "Are you going to stay and become your deputy minister?" Akashi Kin held his hands and raised his eyebrows slightly. He looked at Takuya Mizutani, then changed his tone and sighed, "But, I was wrong. After starting a real business, you will find that Qingzhiyuan is just an original painting. What games can he understand? Hey!" Sakata Taiji, who came from the original painting next to him, suddenly looked up and said, "Why did the president curse me too?" "Huh," Qixi sang. Shuegu covered his chest and let out a long, resentful voice, "Don't always gasp so hard when you talk, it's scary to say it." He breathed a long sigh of relief and said, "That's a deal. We'll talk about resignation together later. Bruce's side is still waiting for us." At this moment, one hand knocked on the glass door, and a sound came from outside. "Three predecessors, the president has asked you to attend a meeting, and it is said that there is something important to announce." The three of them glanced at each other and secretly clenched their fists. A few people entered the conference room, and Qing Zhiyuan sat upright above the room. In addition, there are also hardware engineer Hiroyoshi Chikawa and copywriter Meika Ishino inside. Shuegu still has some understanding of what they have been doing recently. Originally, Qingzhiyuan wanted to bring Shuegu to do a project, but after finding a new home, his mind was not focused on the new project at all. A few people are seated. Akashi Kin goes to close the door. Shuegu Long also opened his mouth and prepared to mention his resignation. The funding issue has been resolved, and DUN Company, Limited has agreed to invest in us for a total of 70 million yuan. At the meeting, Qing Zhiyuan bluntly said, "The company's cash flow is still very abundant now, so we can have a big fight." Qixi Jian turned around and gave a thumbs up to Qing Zhiyuan, "Amazing president, we can definitely do the game well." Nani. Ryu Mizutani also widened his eyes. Qixi sang, "That's not what you said before." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. There are only orders that are not accepted, and there is nothing that cannot be done well. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. There are only orders that are not accepted, and there is nothing that cannot be done well. Since Akashi Kin doesn't plan to leave, Sakata Taiji naturally won't leave either. Only Shuegu felt extremely uncomfortable sitting in the same place, which was equivalent to revealing his underwear to someone else. However, these two people were unwilling to come up, causing him to sit alone in the wind, feeling very awkward. Okay. Meika Ishino began to distribute the pre-printed project proposal to the big shots one by one as instructed by Qingzhiyuan. Previously, there was a lack of funds to start a business, but now with DUN's investment, it is natural to quickly complete the project. Let's take a look. This is the revised plan we have negotiated based on DUN, and we will rely on everyone in the future, said Qing Zhiyuan. Everyone lowered their heads and flipped through the materials in their hands. After a while. Ha! We're going to switch to Little Blue Game. Shuegu suspected his eyes were wrong. What if we agreed to create a tear-jerking and healing-style large costume fantasy romance RPG? Why are you taking off all your clothes now? This sound startled Qixi, who was fully focused on the project proposal, and she almost didn't drop her notebook with a flick of her finger. Qing Zhiyuan frowned fiercely. This also poked at the pain points of him and Meika Ishino. It's a game, not a blue game, corrected Qing Zhiyuan. Isn't that the same? In Shuegu's perception, gameplay is almost equivalent to blue game. It's different, just dating without exposure, emphasized Qing Zhiyuan. Although he is right, the current game has not yet developed, and players cannot experience the beauty of pure love in their cognition. It can only be said that stereotypes like shuegu are the inner thoughts of most people. Qing Zhiyuan also hates this, so he doesn't want to take on the Gal game order. But why did you agree to do such a thing? Takashi Mizutani couldn't understand. There's no way, Qing Zhiyuan shook his head. This is the only condition for DUN to invest in us. But in this way, the game has become more flavorful. It feels like the elements of battle and love cannot be mixed together, said Shuegu. It's over, Pokini is completely finished. The players who are playing gameplay now are all impatient and wish they could directly blame the game on their faces. How dare you even let them play battles? Isn't this seeking death? A 2-hour movie, everyone is also fast-forward and watching it in 10 minutes. How can an RPG that takes no less than 10 hours of experience allow players to experience the essence of love in a short period of time? Confused, President. However, Ryu Mizutani was secretly grateful that he had found his next job, otherwise Pokini would have been unemployed after bankruptcy. Well, since I have agreed, there is no second way out, Qing Zhiyuan made up his mind. Is there no way to change it? Meika Ishino beside her also agreed, can we integrate the part of love interaction into the game plot, or make it into a small Easter egg after completing the level? Don't. Qing Zhiyuan shook his head. It's not just about anything else. The main thing is to live up to Pokini's reputation and company brand. For this, not only can we not simplify it, but we also need to incorporate love as a part of the game's unique features. I think even in a game, we can still achieve the most exciting, make players feel the soul we inject into the game. Qingzhiyuan is not that easy to give up, like, since it's a love game, I've never had the idea of completely going the other way, or of not letting the love part ruin the tone of the entire game, just hiding the love part. This person is just one track, doing everything to the best of their ability. In his brain, he can find a balance between the two. No, rather than talking about the balance point, let's talk about the fusion point. There are works that can perfectly integrate tear-jerking games with gameplay, so it is entirely possible to achieve this. Just like writing a novel, there is always a good combination between whether it is a higher proportion of business or daily life. However, in this way, the production of Yin-Yang Master will be slightly different from the single-threaded mode of the Immortal Sword. Qingzhiyuan envisions increasing the degree of freedom in the game, so that the male protagonist can choose which female protagonist to conquer through his own actions. That's all. Aha. Meika Ishino nodded forcefully, clenched her fists, and silently drummed in her heart. After the meeting, Takashi Mizutani also submitted his resignation. Qing Zhiyuan was taken aback for a moment, seemingly not expecting that this person had been quite active in the meeting just now. Why did he leave so hastily now? After hesitating for a moment, Qing Zhiyuan still accepted the other party's resignation. The employment system of Neon is a lifelong contract system. If an employee does not voluntarily resign, the company cannot dismiss them casually, otherwise they will have to pay a large amount of compensation. Since Shuegu and I can't pee in the same lake, it's better to leave. Pokini's original plan, including the main strategy, consisted of only 4 people in total. There is also 1 copywriting, 1 system planning, and 1 level planning. There's no way, small companies are like this, 1 person can support 2 people. Now that the main planner has left, the project progress cannot be delayed and can only be managed by Qing Zhiyuan himself. That is to say, for a considerable period of time in the future, Qing Zhiyuan will serve as the game producer and chief planner. Fortunately, Qing Zhiyuan's thinking is very clear, and he came from a programming ape background in his previous life, so he has a very clear initial framework requirement for the project in the early stages. After more than a week of planning, the overall plan for the game was implemented, and the requirements began to be continuously output to the program and art, and the project officially began to operate. Although I didn't say it on my lips, everyone knows it in their hearts. Maybe this game, Yin-Yang Master, will be Pokini's last game, without achieving sales results, the company went bankrupt and they lost their jobs. So everyone worked hard and worked overtime. I wouldn't have worked so hard a year ago. The main reason is that after the neon foam burst, the economy was too depressed. The project progress can be described as pleasing. Even Qingzhiyuan has produced a kind of, this Nima is not in the neon, but in the illusion of China. In 2023, the average working hours of China's internet industry will be 74 hours a week, industry internal information, unofficial statistics, which can be said to be the king of the role. Pokini is almost there now. The only difference is that now these people are all spontaneous. The employees are working so hard, and as the president, Qing Zhiyuan is not idle either. He works almost 24 hours a day, not only controlling the original drawings, but also pulling the planning project team to come up with specific requirements. Sometimes he even looks at the program code and occasionally raises some key questions. It's really something that ordinary people can handle. 1 month later. No way, this music, Qing Zhiyuan said with a frown as he took off his headphones. The most important thing for making a blue game is that the script and original artwork are good enough to stimulate players, especially straight men's impulses. Now that all of these are in place, the most headache-inducing issue is the music. A good blue game, a good RPG, with a very high proportion of music, no less than art, just like watching a movie, you can get an immersive experience, largely because the background music introduces you into it. If the background sound is turned off in a horror movie, the horror experience will be reduced by 50%. For the healing game, the same applies. If the music for the Sword of Immortals is replaced with good luck or the most dazzling ethnic style, even if the spirit dies, you won't be able to cry. It can be imagined how important music is. But where can I find a good soundtrack? End of this chapter. Chapter 9. 9 Of course, it's about robbing people. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Of course, it's about robbing people. The length of the ruler varies, and the length of the inch varies. As for Pokini, this small company is very strong in terms of original painting. After all, the president himself comes from an original painting background, so there is definitely no need to say anything about image control and character design. Before Qingzhiyuan traveled, Pokini's art team was already very strong. And then, hardware engineers are also very impressive. The program is average, but in the era of Neon, it is already sufficient to make the game run smoothly and meet the current planning needs, at least not too low. But Pokini's music has always been a weakness. The founder himself did not pay much attention to game music, and the timing of game music intervention is often relatively late. The importance of the game may be intentionally or unintentionally overlooked. After all, without music, you can still play it, but if the game's art and programming are too poor, it is an obstructive bug. At the beginning, the company specifically hired a few people to serve as the company's soundtrack and established a sound effects team. However, during the game-making process, it was discovered that outsourcing might be more cost-effective, so this department was laid off. Now Qingzhiyuan has asked people to find several outsourcing companies, which is currently the limit that Pokini can afford. However, the samples they sent back have been listened to several times, but I still don't feel anything. Small samples refer to samples. After simple communication and before signing the contract, the music company will produce some short samples of the following music according to the needs of Party A, which may last for about 10 seconds. The main purpose is to reflect the strength of the music company and whether it meets Party A's needs. Just like when you want to buy apples sold by a company in bulk, you always want to try a few to see how they taste. Qingzhiyuan has listened to several companies and sent back a total of more than 10 samples, but still feels that there are some areas where he is not very satisfied. This is not the fairy sword in his mind, oh no, Master Yin and Yang. To be honest, the graphics and game performance of the DOS version of Sword of Legends were not very good back then, but the music was still very impressive, and it also laid the foundation for future martial arts style music. It can be said that it was a pioneering work. Is there any other music outsourcing available? Qing Zhiyuan put down his headphones and raised his head to ask. Standing in front of him was a slender girl. The HR of the company, Ia Sai. I am 26 years old this year. To be honest, most neon girls are petite in stature, and it's really rare for them to grow up to 1.7 meters like Ia Sai. Even among the men in the company, this girl can be described as standing out from the crowd. Fortunately, Qing Zhiyuan's height is decent, he is of mixed Chinese and Japanese descent, and now he looks like 178. Upon hearing the president's question, Ia Sai replied with a worried face, "Nothing else is as good as these few." She also tried her best. After the end of the foam era, many music outsourcing companies went bankrupt. It would be good if there were still living ones. The president was picky. But Ia Sai herself didn't understand. As an HR, when did she start working on music and sound effects? However, in reality, Ia Sai is just acting as a contact person. After all, HR usually does resume screening work, and industry insiders still know many people. President, actually it sounds pretty good to me. You listen to this drumbeat, thump 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 thump. When she noticed the president's cold gaze, she silently took off her earphones. I'm sorry, I was wrong. The little HR obediently stood aside. Actually, I'm a sound addict, I don't have any aesthetics at all. Qing Zhiyuan gave her a disdainful glance. It was not a matter of musical aesthetics at all. Headphones are such a personal thing, just like a toothbrush, how can they be worn casually? What should I do if I wear it incorrectly and encounter problems? Qing Zhiyuan remained silent, closed his eyes and pondered silently. There are many master composers of neon music, but the asking price is very high, and many of them are official music signed by the company, so they will not do anything for other companies. Do you want to go find a senior like Hisashi Rang? Iace Chen roast. I'm just a little HR, why don't the president directly recruit a few professionals? Hey! Originally, Ia Sai was just saying angry words to make the president retreat and choose a similar one among these samples. Unexpectedly, this guy's eyes suddenly opened, startling her. Xiao HR took a step back and said, President, don't be surprised at first. I'm afraid, I just talked nonsense. I'll go find someone to contact and see if there are any other game soundtracks. No, you're right, Qing Zhiyuan raised a hand and interrupted her. He thought of someone. Nanny. President, do you really want to invite Hisashi Rang? Ia Sai widened her eyes in fear. No, it's not. Qing Zhiyuan shook his head. Qianzhang, help me find if there is a person named Shirakawa Toshi. Qian. Sauce. Ia Sai was taken aback for a moment, seemingly not expecting the president to call her such a affectionate name. Seeing Qing Zhiyuan's handsome face, she couldn't help but feel a flurry of deer in her chest. Shirakawa Toshi. I haven't heard of it, said Ia Sai, feeling a bit confused. There are many master composers of neon music, but Ia Sai does not have any impression of Shirakawa Toshi. Many people are unfamiliar with the name Takushi Shirakawa, but when it comes to his other name, I believe everyone already knows, Tianmen. If Hayao Miyazaki's possession of Hisashi was a perfect match, then for the leading figure in the animation industry, wallpaper maniac, and electric car enthusiast Shin Haicheng, Tianmen was equivalent to his possession of Hisashi. Many of Shin Haicheng's works are composed by a young man named Takushi Shirakawa, who is also known as Tianmen. For example, She and Her Cat, 5 cm per second, and Children Chasing Stars. The composition of Tianmen vividly reflects his proficiency in music from the music and painting and healing genres. The melodious melodies of piano and string music are pure, serene, and refreshing, and the music produced for Qing animation has touched the hearts of countless young people. If Qing Zhiyuan remembers correctly, this person should be on the way to finding a job now. Ia Sai turned around and left the president's office, bringing accurate information in less than an hour. President, I was able to contact you, but the other party said they seem to have an intention to go to another company. How can it be repaired? Ia sang, let's go over now. Qingzhiyuan stood up and went to get his coat. In the past. Where are we going? Ia Sai stared with big eyes, completely unable to understand what the president was saying. And, when I needed it before, I called her Qingzhiyuan. Why did I change it to Ia Sang now? It's better to take action than to be tempted, of course it's to grab someone. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Air. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Air. In his wildest dreams, Takushi Shirakawa never expected that the president of this company would sit at his own house in the afternoon after a phone call he just received this morning. The place where he lives now is still a small apartment of less than 30 square meters, and the house is very messy. Apart from a relatively clean electronic keyboard, there is almost no place to stay. After Qingzhiyuan entered the house, Shirakawa Toshi quickly cleared up an empty space in fear and brewed tea for the two of them. Although the neon sign person doesn't have much at home, there is still a bit of tea. Sorry to trouble you. Qing Zhiyuan held a teacup and silently looked at Shirakawa Toshi. This is a man with a small round face and a short stature, just like most neon people nowadays. If you put him in the crowd, you will definitely not notice his kind in the first place. There is a picture online in the past that seems to better illustrate the current situation. Fake game musician. With a stylish and cool head of hair, neatly groomed, wearing sunglasses to hide, a beautiful jawline, a tough and handsome profile, dressed in gorgeous and avant-garde cyberpunk clothes, no belly, 8-pack abs, and a signature watch, hands in pockets, reflecting a rebellious temperament. Real game musician. Fluffy and messy hair, round face, wearing a simple black T-shirt, hard and deep eyes, having a small belly, powerful hands, and a simple and unadorned temperament. Just as Qingzhiyuan was looking at him, Takushi Shirakawa was silently scrutinizing the president in front of him. Looking handsome, with just this appearance and physique, it's more than enough to become a star. How could you think of playing games? In such an era, it is truly surprising that the president who is willing to visit at the door is still a bit surprising. Qing Zhiyuan gave a brief introduction to Pokini, himself, and his intentions, and sincerely invited, if Shirakawa-san comes to our company, we will try our best to provide you with a reasonable salary. Takushi Shirakawa lowered his head and did not agree immediately. Or on the contrary, Qing Zhiyuan's words made him frown. But why me? What I mean is, I don't think I have much talent, and I'm a newcomer with no representative work. Why did the president think of me as the game soundtrack for your company? You should know that there are a large number of unemployed musicians nowadays, and there are many predecessors with more experience and qualifications than me. Why did the president of the youth association not go to them but to me? That's because nowadays, Takushi Shirakawa is still a pure newcomer without any representative works. Qing Zhiyuan recalled that he couldn't even find a word to flatter. I can't say that because I can predict the future and know that you will have great achievements in music in the future, and will become the official music of Qingzhiyuan. Can you compare with Hisaishi Rang? The most famous work of Tianmen, Zhuohua Shou, was not created until 2007. That's because I've looked at your resume, Qing Zhiyuan sighed and said, before that, we actually conducted a certain degree of investigation on you, knowing that you are good at and like the music style. You are the kind of music creator who can calm the players' hearts, provide healing and comfort, and be pure and flawless. Our company's new works happen to require such music, and you are the best candidate we are looking for. Nanny. Ia Sai was stunned when she heard it next to her. Are you too good at lying, President? When did we conduct a background check on Shirakawa-san? And how do we know what genre this person likes? Is it too risky for the president to play straight like this? But when she observed the change in expression on Takushi Shirakawa's face, Iase was secretly surprised. Ale. How could this guy really eat this? It is obvious that when Shirakawa heard Qing Zhiyuan's words, there was a deep shock in his eyes, as if his soul had been hit by a straight ball. This is actually inevitable, because the popular game music on the market nowadays, due to hardware limitations, cannot produce very rich mixing effects like later on, and games mainly lean towards electronic music and rock. In his past life, Takushi Shirakawa did not discover his true expertise in healing music before encountering Shin Haicheng. Instead, he followed the trend and made ordinary game music, even without his own style. But deep down, he still likes music works like Hisaishi that can shake people's hearts, are clean and pure. I just haven't encountered a suitable medium for him to express himself. Qing Zhiyuan's words clearly pierced his heart. Baichuan opened his mouth and just uttered a syllable, his throat choked up. He cleared his throat, calmed down his emotions, and sighed, "Thank you to the president for appreciating me so much, but I really don't have much confidence in whether I can do a good game score." Takushi Shirakawa is telling the truth. As a newcomer who has never done game music before, he has to take on the main soundtrack of the entire game from the beginning, which can't help but cause some panic. Think about it, if a newly graduated college student were to directly become a project leader, he wouldn't dare to. Shirakawa sang. "Can you give it a try?" Qing Zhiyuan encouraged, "No one is naturally capable of becoming the top of the pyramid, but how do you know you can't do it without trying? Some things are really innate. And music is such a thing." Shirakawa tilted his head and thought for a moment, "I still think that with my current age and qualifications, it would be better to learn more from others first. How can it be repaired? Is this guy a stone? Hard and insecure, it sank into the soil. Otherwise, let's take a look at our game plan first. You will definitely be interested in this project." Qing Zhiyuan put the plan on the coffee table and pushed it to Baichuan. The latter nodded and said, "Okay." Takashi Shirakawa took over the plan and politely said to Qing Zhiyuan, "President, I will definitely read it carefully." In fact, at this point, there is already the meaning of, "Let's call it a day," and, "Give me some time to consider," but due to face saving, Shirakawa did not directly say, "You can leave." But Qingzhiyuan has no intention of leaving at all. Hello. Even the little HR next to him felt anxious for the president. "President, air. Do you know how to look at the air?" Observing words and expressions is a skill that Neon people have developed since childhood. Not causing trouble for others is a good quality, but this president seems to not understand these. Qingzhiyuan had no intention of leaving at all, but silently waited to see Shirakawa Toshi carefully read this proposal. So Takushi Shirakawa could only grit his head and flip over. "At first, I was a bit helpless, but after carefully reading for a while, I gradually became attracted. Even in the brain of Takushi Shirakawa, beautiful paintings can be depicted, full of romantic yin-yang masters, stories between humans and monsters. The melody in my heart also rang out." End of this chapter.